This celestial or star food was said to heighten the pharaoh's powers of perception, awareness, and intuition, and was responsible for an overall transcendence of personality to the angelic state. Now, it's very interesting in light of the research I've been doing recently that Lawrence Gardner maintains, as do others, that Tutmosis III was actually the founder of this alchemical tradition, and that he was also the founder of the Essene tradition, which is very interesting speculation. And I'll be having much more to say very soon about the Essenes and their ability to produce this angel food or star food. As Musaeus continues, he tells us that all this brings us to a key point about ancient Egyptian ethnobotany, that ingestion of the sacred material was designed not merely to give a high, but to trigger and impel the metamorphic process leading to a theurgic transmutation of human nature into apotheosis. Metamorphic process obviously refers to transfiguration or a change of form. Theurgic transmutation refers to the divine work. In sacred traditions, you have theology, which is God talk or talking about God. This is what theologians do. Then you have theurgy, which means the divine work, to do the work of the gods. The work that the gods always wanted humanity to do was to transform into divine beings. That is the meaning of the word apotheosis, to raise from a human to a divine level. And it kind of bothers me in a way that we've gotten kind of sidetracked in the past maybe 20 years or so by assertions that the gods somehow came to Earth to mine gold, and that they were attempting to mine this gold, but they weren't successful in mining enough of it fast enough. So they genetically altered a primitive form of human into a worker race, into a slave race, so that these new primitive humans could do the work of the gods, mining gold. That never rang true to me, even though it's virtually a religion today in the kind of ancient astronaut or ancient alien theorist realm, if you will. Zecharia Sitchin was the primary promoter of this idea. So I refer to this as the Gospel of Zecharia Sitchin. He came up with this interpretation that these god beings came to Earth, created us as a slave race to mine gold. In my view, I mean, that is possible because there's no question that the ancient Egyptians used a tremendous amount of gold. I mean, we're talking hundreds upon hundreds of tons. Virtually everything was covered with gold. If you're walking into a temple and it had a door, it was covered with gold. Many of the scenes on the temple walls were covered with gold. Gold was practically as plentiful as sand in ancient Egypt, and they had an unbelievable mastery of working with gold. So they had to get it out of the ground somehow. Maybe they did create a slave race in order to do this. However, we also know, and are told in fact by Mr. Sitchin himself in his speculations, that these god beings were alchemists. An alchemist has as his primary goal or task the transmutation of one element into another. Lead to gold, coal to diamond, flesh to celestial flesh, or our light body. So why would an alchemist need to come to Earth and violate a so-called prime directive and create a slave race to mine gold for it? Why wouldn't he just take a hunk of lead and transmute it? Wouldn't that be easier? I'm wondering. Furthermore, it suggests to me this idea that, again, getting back to the idea of theurgy, the divine work, that the work that we do for God and the gods is our divine work, our apotheosis, to raise ourselves from humans into God beings. And that to me is the work that I seek to spend my time exploring and operate from this premise that these divine beings came to earth on a mission to assist us in not enslaving us, but in our ascension. This process of ascension was overseen by these cosmic regents, these living archetypes of stellar powers. I believe that the god beings of ancient Egypt were real beings, that they were probably super high frequency light beings that could take on physical form. And to attain awareness of these star powers or star beings is one of our primary goals, if not the primary goal, in our own quest for ascension. At the very top of the list of the gods of ascension, if you will, is the Egyptian god Ptah, the creator god, the god of craftsmen. Ptah, in fact, is the namesake of Egypt itself. The word Egypt is a Greek corruption of hypsos, which means the house of the Ka, or light body, of Ptah. So Egypt itself is named after this very powerful god, Egyptos. You can see Ptah in the very name Egypt. Ptah, according to Egyptian mythology and sacred tradition, came from Sirius, the star system Sirius. He has a wife or a consort. Her name is Sekhmet. As she's portrayed here, she's the lion-headed goddess and protector of humanity. When we go to the Egyptian hieroglyphic dictionary, we find the business card, if you will, of Ptah. He is the architect of heaven and earth, the master craftsman in working metals, sculptor, designer, and the fashioner of the bodies of men. He was the blacksmith, sculptor, and mason of the gods, the fashioner of the bodies of men. Now, something that I'm on record as saying, and kind of out here on a limb on my own, is to say, well, look at this hieroglyph of Ptah. Can we see a double helix in his hieroglyph? I believe so. We also see the flag or hatchet symbol of the netter, of another term for the gods. And we also see a symbol for a temple. So if you're talking to a traditional Egyptologist, they're going to be kind of laughing at us at the moment with this suggestion that Ptah or the ancient Egyptians knew anything about genetics. And just because the god, the ancient Egyptians said, fashioned the human body, has a double helix in his hieroglyph, that really doesn't mean anything. It doesn't prove that he's a geneticist. But to me, it takes us a long way down the road towards speculating that perhaps Ptah was in fact this otherworldly being who came to Earth on a mission. He is the same as Enki in the Sumerian tradition. And returning back to Zechariah Sitchin's gospel, Enki is the geneticist in the Sumerian tradition, Sitchin says, that tweaked the human body and also created us as a slave race. And that just doesn't tally or reconcile with what the ancient Egyptians said about Ptah. Very comfortable in them possibly being interchangeable symbolically and mythologically as the same figure, but their mission is completely different. As portrayed on the walls of Queen Nefertari's tomb in the Valley of the Queens in Upper Egypt, Ptah served a very powerful role. His role, according to this scene, was that he provided to Nefertari her transparent garment of life, her non-molecular light body into which her consciousness could be deposited into the afterlife. That is what these 4 hieroglyphs symbolize that she is offering to Ptah. They symbolize new clothes. And the way I read this scenario here is that she is thanking Ptah for the gift of altering her DNA so that her consciousness then could be amplified and she could then begin this process of transmutation or manifestation of her non-molecular light body that would put her in a similar body to what we see Ptah in here. As we see Ptah in his golden shrine, he stands on a stone block that symbolizes Ma'at, or cosmic order. He wears a tight-fitting garb or garment, referred to as the crossed garment by the ancient Egyptians, the crossed garment. He holds in his hand a combined resurrection stick that is a combination of the Uaz, Ankh, and Jed symbols, meaning life and stability. It's his resurrection stick that enables him to open the gates of heaven. Behind him is the multicolored stairway to heaven, the Tet pillar, the power pillar, also symbolizing resurrection. Very importantly, Ptah not only fashioned the human body, he also is responsible for creating the Ark of the Millions of Years, or the Ship of Eternity, as it's also called, the craft that the soul will sail upon into eternity once it has crafted or made its non-molecular light body. In this instance here, we're looking at a king, one of the Ptolemaic kings, from the ceiling of the Temple of Hathor at Dendera. And he stands holding his resurrection stick, sailing towards the constellation of Orion. Something that I noticed a long time ago, and what I refer to as my Robert Bauval moment. That moment when Robert Bauval looks at the pattern of the three pyramids of Giza, looks up at the three belt stars of Orion, and makes that mirror connection, that heaven to earth, as above, so below connection. Back in 2003, I looked up at the ceiling of Dendera and said, wait a minute, the way the ancient Egyptians portrayed the Ark of the Millions of Years looks exactly like the way modern science portrays a wormhole. And that started me on this quest to understand the possibility that the ancient Egyptians were familiar with the wormhole, or certainly the symbolism of the wormhole, as a mechanism through which the soul can travel the cosmos. We all experience a birth, we experience a life, and we experience a death. That cycle is modeled by the wormhole. We all experienced an inhuman past. We didn't come from Earth originally, we came from somewhere else. We all experience a life, which we call the present, and we will all experience a resurrection in the future. We will perhaps return to the stars. And this is what we see modeled by the ancient Egyptians, is that they portray their resurrected beings sailing the stars as eternal beings on their wormhole-shaped arcs of the millions of years. This connection that I've, again, fused way back in 2003, launched me on this quest, along with this material of Charles Musaeus, to try to put together as much as we can about the ancient Egyptian light body teachings. And it suggested to me that if Ptah is the one who fashioned the human body, that perhaps he must have tweaked our body so that it could be more adaptive to traveling the stars through a wormhole. One thing I know for certain is this flesh and blood body is not going to sit on this feathered ascension throne and travel the stars. It is only our non-molecular light body that is capable of making this journey. And so it's very important for us to begin to connect with, mentally, physically, and spiritually, and emotionally, our future self, which is what we see portrayed on the temple walls. Here we see the Ptolemaic king wearing the crown of wisdom with his lotus craft, the Ark of the Millions of Years, his feathered ascension throne. He's got his resurrection stick, and the ancient Egyptian symbol, the key of life. In my opinion, these are all aspects of our light body, psycho-spiritual attributes. It's not like we're going to go down to Nordstrom and go buy the latest key of life. Target won't sell you, or Best Buy won't sell you the latest resurrection stick. This is all developed from within us. It's conscious awareness, opening up our crown, recognizing that our resurrection stick is probably our spinal cord system. The key of life in ancient Egypt is compassion in action. All of this ultimately assists us in manifesting our resurrection throne, our feathered resurrection throne, in opening the stargates or wormholes that take us into eternity. This, in my opinion, is why Ptah was here. This is the teaching of Ptah and Sekhmet. And the record of this teaching is left for us on various temple walls, including Medinet Habu, where we see this beautiful depiction of Ptah as a blue-green being. Same thing here with Sekhmet. She's also portrayed as blue-green. We're talking a moment about why they are portrayed as blue-green beings. Back at Medinet Habu, once again, another great representation of Ptah. When we're on tour, I'm very often paying as close attention as I can to Ptah, looking at the columns, looking at the temple walls, taking the pictures, and bringing Ptah's energy into my consciousness, because I know that Ptah is probably two things. He is both a stellar consciousness who's capable of transmitting his consciousness across vast distances and communicating with us, especially in dreams, which is what we learn at Saqqara. And he could also be a physical being as well. He could manifest himself physically in an incarnate form. We're going to see that this is literally true here in just a moment. I wanted to share this with you. We were in the Sekhmet Chapel at Karnak Temple, a very special place where you see this just absolutely incredible 3,500-year-old living statue of Sekhmet. It's one of Claire's favorite stops on our tours. And on this particular occasion, Claire, as you can see, is crouching at the feet of Sekhmet. She is touching her hands to the statue. And look to behind Claire, who's on the left. Look at what is coming out of the wall. A couple of our guests were flabbergasted, gobsmacked, when they saw this image and asked, is it possible that that is actually Sekhmet? Or could it even be Ptah, who is stepping out of some other world and into that chapel at that moment? I can't say yes or no for sure, but it sure is a provocative scene. Another couple examples of Ptah. Just want you to be very familiar with the representations of how Ptah is portrayed in the Egyptian temple walls. These examples here are actually at the temple of Seti I at Abydos. A couple more examples here from Abydos. They're just absolutely mind-boggling images when you think about what the story is behind this figure of a benevolent celestial being comes to earth from Sirius on a mission to augment the human body, to tweak it so that we can become more like the divine beings and that we in fact can ascend from the earth plane. That is the essential and core mystery of Ptah. And now coming back to Nefertari's tomb, we see this anointing by not just Ptah, but also by Isis, where we once again see Nefertari wearing her transparent linen garment, the object of the light body quest of the ancient Egyptians, with her red sash, her lifeline to the divine. It's always such a pleasure to visit Nefertari's tomb. We have millions of visitors that go to Egypt every year. And I would guesstimate that the total number of visitors that visit Nefertari's tomb every year is just the hundreds. It's in the Valley of the Queens. It's kind of off the beaten trail a little bit for your traditional tours. But we always make a point to go to Nefertari's tomb just because it is so spectacularly beautiful. And also ultimately for the meaning behind these scenes here, where now we're looking at Osiris and his light body garment, his crossed garment, always, of course, with his red sash on, his lifeline to the divine realm. It's, to me, one of the most peaceful places anywhere on the planet. And it's always just a very special moment to be able to just go into this tomb, 33,000 plus year old tomb, and just contemplate what it is actually that we are looking at here of a human on her path to ascension, and this quest that she had, that Nefertari had, for transmutation, for coming face to face with the gods and becoming a celestial being. Nefertari, of course, is also portrayed. She's the wife, as I mentioned earlier, of Ramses the Great. So she's often portrayed in statues at Karnak and elsewhere. And even in these statues here at Luxor, I'll always make a beeline when we visit the Luxor temple to go pay homage, if you will, to Ramses the Great, who we see here in these giant statues. And love connecting with Ramses the Great, have a real special affinity with these Ramses kings. But it's beyond Ramses. What I'm really there to see is Nefertari. She's tucked just underneath her husband. She's shown much smaller, of course. The king is always shown as this massive being of perfection. But standing beside him are these just absolutely, just truly elegant scenes of Nefertari, she of the beautiful face, as she was called, that are absolute masterpieces of sculpture. And in all these instances, we see the same scenario. She is wearing her transparent linen garment, which is, to me, portrayed, as we see here on the right, quite hauntingly. And it tells us that this, again, is the object of the ancient Egyptian mysteries, is to craft this light body. We craft it through our thoughts, we craft it through our intentions, but especially we craft it through our connection with Ptah. And Ptah is, again, the God. He can enter into our dream state and assist us in our ascension.